Okay.
Okay, perfect. Well, hello everybody. Thanks so much for being here with us for our Motherhood 101 chat. Today we have Kate Taylor, who is a music therapist and a birth doula, and she is going to talk all about music for birth and postpartum. So, I know this topic applies to so many of you, and if you found yourself here, you're probably, waiting to give birth to your baby or your early postpartum days and just wondering, like, okay, what can music do for me? And how can I use music as a coping tool? So, we're happy to be here today. I'm so grateful for Kate for giving her time. And just FYI, the plan is for us to have Motherhood 101 chats once a month moving forward, where we bring in experts on certain topics related to motherhood and mental health. And we just hope that you find yourself here and just enjoy and find a piece to take with you to help you on your motherhood journey. So, without further ado, Kate, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Celeste. I'm really glad to be here with anybody who's joining us or listening later because it really is a passion of mine to share about music as a tool for regulating our nervous system, relaxing us, moving us to emotion. And that's especially true during birth and postpartum. If anybody's been through it or you're about to, it's definitely a time when our emotions change and our behaviors change in relationship to that. But music is something that can be a steady, continuous tool to utilize no matter what you're feeling. So that's what I'm hoping to teach you here today. Celeste did a great job introducing me. And I just wanted to share this is a picture of our family. I have two daughters, one's in college, one's in high school. And so they keep me very busy. And I did use music for both of their births. One was longer, the other second was short, but I still was able to use music not just in their births, but preparing for it and also in my postpartum experience. So I'll share a couple of stories from not just my life, but also other clients that I've worked with as a doula, changing some of their information so that you just can get the meat of what the music was used for them during their birth experiences. So it's something I really enjoy doing. So I'm really grateful to have the chance to do it here because I really love the mission of the center and everything about music does align with support that the center is trying to offer as well. So here's some quick takeaways that I hope you will be able to learn about today. And it's just kind of an outline or overview of what we'll talk about too. But this is just not to overwhelm you, but to give you just enough information that you can purposefully and intentionally choose the music you use throughout the day to make a major difference in how you feel, how your baby feels, and even how your other children and people around you feel when you're elevated by that change in music. So it's more than just background noise, okay? It definitely regulates our nervous system. If you've ever been listening to a piece of music and you started tapping your toes without even realizing it, that is an effect of entrainment, which is just a phenomenon in physics that talks about how things that are moving start to move together when they're close enough. And that is true with music. When music starts to move our heart rate, our blood pressure, our nervous system signals, even how our brain works, regulation occurs because we either know what to expect in the music or we anticipate what happens in the music. So that has a great change on our nervous system. And I'll show you some couple ways today how to actually regulate that when your nervous system feels a little bit out of control. Does that sound good? I hope so. It provides emotional safety and grounding. If you've ever had a favorite song that brings up emotions for you, if you've ever had a song that brings you back to a time or a place, that is what music can do emotionally and in terms of providing safety and grounding. Now, the opposite is also true when we're watching a scary movie and the music is really on edge. It can change your nervous system as well. That's why, as I mentioned, it's important to make intentional choices, especially when you're in a period of transition. Music specifically can help with bonding between parents and babies. And it's not just the music, it's also the voice, the heartbeat, the whole sensory stimulation that music can provide. So if I don't mention this again, I want to mention it now, which is headphones on your belly. Let's do something better. Let's listen to music open air with the baby inside you so that you experience the change in your body, in your music, in your relaxation when you're listening, so that your baby has context. It's not just sound coming at it, it's a context of music plus an emotional safety and a bond with you. So that's one tip I want to make sure not to forget. So I'm giving it to you now. And then stress reduction and rest. Music can be a perfect container to handle your stress by either matching it and playing something that's a little maybe chaotic and moving and intense, or it can help bring you to rest by slowing down, whether it's the tempo or the tonalities or just the overall melody of the piece of music. So, music can do a lot of things, and it absolutely works when words don't. If you've ever remembered being in elementary school or you have any elementary age students, you know that teachers use music in the classroom to get them to clean up, everybody, everywhere. That is because music reaches the brain when words don't. So I'm going to go into more of that, but these are going to be your takeaways. Hopefully after today you'll be able to know how to use music more intentionally to regulate your nervous system, how to find emotional safety and grounding in music, how to use some music to bond and release your stress and rest a little bit, okay? The reason all this works is because music is holistic. Not just what we hear in our ears, it's whole brain, whole body. So, what that means is that it affects our biological systems, heart rate, blood pressure. Talked about that before. It affects our psychological well being. I mentioned a couple of examples of that already. But it's also social and emotional, meaning we experience music together, usually. These days, we hear it a lot more in our earbuds and isolated, which is why even I like to encourage when you're with your kids, make sure you're all listening to the music together, no matter what age they are, because it gives you opportunity to bond and entrain, meaning move together, and to maybe talk about what those lyrics mean, or to create more bonding with your own voice when you're sharing that music. So I mentioned teachers use music to herd chaos in their classroom, but music's also developmental, meaning it's a learning tool. We learned our ABCs to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, whether you know it or not, it's the same melody. So we actually really need music for not just all of those balancings, but also for those experiences that are more whole body, whole brain, like our spiritual and like our environment, how to change the mood of where we are. So music does all of those things and it intersects in a lot of different ways. So let's really quick talk about birthing, right? Because that's what we're here to do. And why I want to show you this is because there are a lot of hormones involved in birth. Believe it or not, there's a lot of hormones involved in stress. There's a lot of hormones involved in happiness and sadness, and some of them are very deeply related, especially during birth. So, in the birthing process, the brain has its primal function, which is to regulate respiration, heart rate, things like that. And then there are ways that we can use the brain or use the body and music to subdue those fight or flight responses, even when bright lights, pain, or discomfort, or something unexpected happens. We can use the music as a constant calm to subdue the neocortex. This is a little sciencey. So the takeaway I want you to get from this is music supports touch. It supports sleep. It supports your environment and it supports your trust and security. And all of those things, as you can see here, are very important for the birthing brain to work correctly to bring about the process and hormones of birth. So it's another indication that music should be, in my professional opinion, a primary tool for the birthing environment before it happens, during labor and delivery, and even after, as a transitional tool that goes throughout the whole spectrum of care. All right. And it's adaptable and changeable and accessible, right? We can get it anywhere we want. I can have music on my watch right now if I wanted to. Um, so during during pregnancy and birth, music can be used for preparation to practice. All right. A little bit later, I'm going to talk about a couple different types of relaxation. But the reason that's important is because relaxation can be preconditioned, just like stress can be when you see this something that stressed you out, or you smell or feel something that made you sick before. That's a reminder to your nervous system that something has happened. So the more pregnant moms can practice with music during pregnancy, the more likely their relaxation response will be a little more conditioned to the music during the birth experience. Small little tip. Worst thing you could do is wait until the very last minute to make a birth playlist and put what someone else recommended on it and nothing you know or recognize. And I'll talk a little bit more later about why that's important. Best thing you could do is practice relaxing every day, as much as you can. If you have other toddlers at home, it's not always easy, but perhaps it could be turned into a game. Where if the music is a container of time, then you know we're relaxing for the next 5 minutes or we're relaxing for the next three songs. And you can tell yourself that, your baby that, and your other children that as well, even spouses and bosses. You can tell them, I'm on a 5 minute relaxation. When my song is over, I'll be right with you. And the reason that's important is because it can also help you not just precondition your relaxation, but change overstimulation in the moment. And that happens in the birth environment quite a bit because mothers might be already dealing with maybe a contraction. And then someone comes in the room, or the lights change, or the monitor changes, or something else. But if during that time they're focusing on just that music and being directed to either the melody, or the bass line or an instrument that feels particularly soothing, then their brain can pay attention to that instead of to the other things happening. Technically, there's a part of your brain that does that, and all of us have it. It's just about honing it and practicing it a little bit. If you've ever walked into a crowded room and you heard someone call your name, that part of your brain works because there's lots of background noise and you heard your name. How'd that work? Because your brain's trained to listen for it. So that's where the relaxation practice comes into play. Your brain will be trained to listen for that music that helps keep you relaxed and in control and potentially happy or sad or whatever you're intentionally choosing it for. There are places in birth for all types of music, especially music that might make a mother feel emotionally safe to cry or emotionally safe to move or even supported enough to make some sounds. So that's where we go into that, how music encourages natural vocalization. The birthing process is not quiet. It has lots of sounds, whether that be in the hospital environment, home environment, where you have a little more control, but also you have control in whatever environment you're in because our vocalization tells our body we're safe or not. If you've ever screamed, then you know your body's response to that is to run or be fearful or to tighten up or tense. But if during the birthing process you can reframe what the sounds are like, and that it's not screaming, but instead it's more moaning or toning or opening or broadening or releasing, right? Not everybody's comfortable doing that without music in the background. So music acts as a really nice support to make natural vocalizations not seem so stark in the environment, like not everyone will hear you, right? The other thing is that it actually encourages moms, music can encourage moms to take that high pitched sort of, ouch, this might be hurting or I might be in discomfort kind of thing to more low and slow and broadening. And that can be done through the change in the music itself. And I'll share some examples of that with you later. It has a lot to do with instrumentation, meaning higher pitched instruments might make someone's voice be up here, whereas lower pitched instruments might give someone the safety and security and the support underneath to lower their voice. So just a couple helpful tips that I'll leave you with in a handout as well. We'll go ahead and send a handout for you as well, is to just choose music with predictability and practice with it, especially during pregnancy. Consider trying to vocalize with the lower tones of the music that's going on, right? Just see how you feel. How does your voice feel when you moan to something that is supportive? How does your voice feel when you cry out with a tight throat to something that's higher? And then just see where you go from there. And remember that familiar songs are really what help cue safety and calm. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit too. So I want to touch on, if I can, the fact that music doesn't exist in a vacuum. I know I mentioned it's biopsychosocial, emotional, spiritual, all those things, but music also activates a lot of part of our bodies that we don't always have as much control over as we'd like and gives us back a little bit of that control. What I mean by that is pain sometimes can get out of control and we don't know how to fix that. Our attention and our focus might sometimes be all over, right? Stress can be unpredictable as well. And also the imagination, the process of visualizing to music, whether you know it or not, happens if you've ever watched a movie and been moved by the soundtrack, and then later hear a song from that soundtrack. and remember the exact scene that movie is from. That is music and imagery. Those soundtrack composers get paid a lot of money to evoke emotion, to create a scene, and to create a common character that can carry with the music. John Williams is someone who's great at doing that as a composer. And so the reason I bring this up is because music is going to evoke imagery responses for most people in a state of relaxation. So why is that important? Because the music that's chosen could create good imagery or scary imagery if that person's in one place or another. And the important key for you to remember as a user of music during a birthing experience, during practice at home, or even postpartum with your baby is that your imagery can be a powerful tool for healing and a powerful tool for stress. And so it's important that if your imagination starts to go somewhere with the music, that you recognize, do I need more of this or do I need to turn it off and change it to something else? And that's really important also just to be aware of. And here at the center, I know that mental health support is so important. And so if there's ever a time when those images feel scary or those thoughts feel intrusive with music or without, it's really important that you reach out for support. Okay. So I want to go a little bit further and talk about that relaxation response because it's not only effective during birth and delivery, it's very effective during times of stress and strain. It's very effective in helping induce sleep responses as well. And the two different types I'm going to be talking about are progressive muscle relaxation, where it's basically where you tighten things up and loosen them one part at a time in response to the music, and then conditioning that pre-conditioned relaxation response, meaning practice, so that when the first few measures of that song that are familiar to you turn on, you've been practicing at home, imagining your labor and delivery going a certain way, and then you're in the labor and delivery experience when that same piece of music turns on, your body and your mind can go to that conditioned imagery and conditioned place of safety, comfort, and optimism for how your birth can continue. In the same regard, that music can also be used to keep you relaxed when things unexpectedly change in birth, which is something that happens a lot. One great story I want to share with you is that I had a couple I was working with. It was their second baby. First baby was a music therapy assisted childbirth at home. She was a vocal performer and she used her voice and beautiful operatic songs during her first labor and delivery and expected the same would happen for the second. However, her baby grew to be a large size and her baby was also a breech. And so her doctors and her family decided her safest route was a cesarean section. She, well, rightfully so, was feeling a little bit disappointed, maybe somewhat upset about the change in plan, but also ultimately knew she had some control over how to make that change of plan the best for her, despite it being different. And that included her choice to ask for and advocate to have her own music brought into the operating room for the labor and delivery. Surprisingly, she didn't choose opera music. She chose a Rafi lullaby. I don't know if you're familiar with Rafi, but she chose a song that goes, thanks a lot. Thanks for the sun in the sky. Thanks for everything. Thanks for everything. It's a lullaby that's about gratitude. And she played that song during her initial operation of delivering her baby because she wanted to have gratitude that this was happening safely and not necessarily disappointment that it didn't happen the way she wanted. And she also used that song a lot with her existing toddler. So it kind of brought family feeling into the operating room. So even our most familiar and preferred music that's outside of what's classified as maybe relaxing could also be very helpful for parents during the birthing experience, during your preparation, and especially afterwards, if it's providing that continuity of peace and calming. Okay. So important to choose music you like, not what I like as a doula or a music therapist, not what Spotify might recommend for you, not what, the person down the road had at their labor and delivery, but what you like and what is familiar to you, meaning have you practiced with it? Have you listened to it and set the intention of how this song will work for you in that environment? You won't always know till you try, but it's important to at least try it first instead of just going in with something that you hope will work. Okay? Um, This is important to know. Breath support and music during labor and delivery. Breathing's very important, but breathing's also very important in postpartum recovery for keeping your nervous system calm. Breathing's also very important for oxygenating your baby while you're pregnant, and also very important that you recognize that breath connection is absolutely connected to anxiety. So, meaning shortness of breath is absolutely connected to anxiety and that cycle that keeps going. We feel anxious, we start breathing rapidly, then we feel more anxious, then our nervous system changes, our blood pressure goes up, our heart rate goes up. It's a cycle that keeps happening. Now, one thing that can break that is the intentional use of breath, meaning taking a slow, deep breath in and letting it out really slow and doing that 4 or 5 times. You might notice right away, even I do, slowing down my talking, you know, it helps. And so in labor and delivery, the reason breast support is extra important to pair with music is because it gives a temporal cue, a cue that you hear that has a tempo and also a rate, a speed, and also direction. So it supports through rhythm. Music supports vocal toning, like I talked about before, and it supports the breath support. When the breath during labor and delivery is actually used correctly, it helps breathe the baby down into place without actually bearing down and pushing until the baby's actually ready. So it's one of my favorite techniques to teach parents before they begin the labor process is that if they're breathing correctly, more often than not, their whole physiological system's working together with the baby to help the baby come down as low as possible during that birth experience. It doesn't mean it's always perfect because sometimes breathing changes when we get scared, right? We breathe faster, we might have to breathe to get through some discomfort. So anytime that happens, the music can be changed to support that kind of breathing. And it can also just break that anxiety cycle by giving your brain, like I said before, something to pay attention to other than the anxiety. Okay. So, um, whether or not it's during labor and you're trying to sleep, believe it or not, that's the best thing sometimes you can do during labor and delivery because of the role of melatonin, which is the sleep hormone, and the role of the other hormones that really only kick in once you sleep. So if you're laboring in a place where there's constant involvement, maybe managing of the process, bright lights, a phone you're scrolling, things like that, the hormones of the brain won't necessarily allow the process to continue uninterrupted. So, what's important you do with music during this time is to use the music to, again, encourage imagination, which may provide some spiritual support, emotional support through imagery, breath control, allowing that music to expand and contract your breath at slow rates if possible and deep rates if possible. And then also give you that opportunity to have something to vocalize over so that you can, while even in a state of sleeping, keep your eyes closed and moan, but know that that background music is still keeping it safe enough to do so because not everyone is, hearing everything that's happening for you. Okay. So, I want to make sure that you all recognize too that be just as versatile as music is in terms of it being body, mind, and spirit, it's versatile enough to go through all these different stages of life with you, including postpartum. Now, when I talk about healing with music, I'm not saying, these frequencies are going to heal your illness or heal your mental health. I'm talking about that sense of well being that comes from having safety and the sense of well being that comes from knowing that even if you had a traumatic experience occur during your birth or even in a fertility journey leading up to it, that all of those feelings have a place in music. Believe it or not, there are many, many artists out there who write about their own motherhood experience as part of their lyrics. There are artists who write out there about loss in their lyrics and in their music in general. That when you're searching for something, if you're looking for something specific, see what you can find based on your specific need and what's already out there because music is such a great reflection of common experiences that people go through. For example, in postpartum, stress and overwhelm. There's a song that's coming to my mind that's called Worn. It talks about like just feeling really worn out and feeling really tired and having the laundry to do and the other things to do and just eventually just needing someone or something to say, "Hey, it's going to be okay." And in this case, it can be the music. It supports rest and emotional recovery. We talked about that in just that last little bit about supporting rest during labor. It's going to be very different when you're not in labor, when you're in that postpartum experience and you're either resting when your baby's resting or you're getting some help and finding some exclusive rest for yourself. The music can serve as a container of not only time, but emotional arcs from feeling good to maybe lamenting and going through something hard to coming back down to a place of safety. The same is true for your children. A lot of times, lullabies are used in postpartum experiences for the baby. But I do want to remind you, if you didn't already know this, that lullabies are actually historically and culturally very lamenting, meaning somewhat sad and somewhat talking about loss and grief. I mean, You Are My Sunshine, Rockabye Baby, they all have verses that, maybe aren't the greatest sometimes for people to think about, but at the same time, the cultural context of lullabies in general and the melodic context of lullabies is a very small range that repeats a lot. And in trauma work and in work about repetition, we know that sometimes that can actually loosen up some things that are stored. So while a lullaby might seem like, okay, let's just play lullabies for the baby, no, I would like to encourage you to use a lullaby for yourself to feel and to have it as a container so that, especially if those feelings start to get too big, that music just gets turned off. Or it's only 3 minutes long, so you can then expect to have maybe some tearfulness, or maybe some lamenting, or maybe some opportunity to journal or write out your feelings to that 3 to 4 minute song, and know that it's safe enough to do so, because as soon as it's done, you can either put it away or bring it to your therapist or talk to a friend about it or play it again and maybe do something more to it, moving, releasing and stretching, even just crying, just sleeping. It's okay. So next time you might be thinking about using a lullaby for your baby, I'd encourage you to choose it intentionally with something that's meaningful for yourself as well. Because while your baby might find comfort in the soft, soothing repetition, you as a mother might find comfort in the soft, soothing repetition for safety, for familiarity, for not too far of a place to go in terms of your emotion, and know that you can come back together. Now, I mentioned earlier soundtrack music. Soundtrack music is another reason or resource, if you will, for evoking emotions. For some reason, the movie Brave is coming to mind. It has a very specific soundtrack, but also a specific story about the relationship between a mother and a daughter, coming of age, struggles of all those things. And so, finding a movie that you love that has a lot of meaning to you and go to that soundtrack and see if you can find some pieces from that soundtrack that might help you feel safe in postpartum, potentially even be used in your birth and with your baby as well. All right. So remember that birth and postpartum, like, they're mixed experiences of emotion. It's not just joy. In fact, most of the time, it's stress and exhaustion. Okay. So the idea is that you choose the songs that match you where you are in that moment instead of where you think you should be, right? If you're feeling down and sad and need a little bit of, maybe let's say, big support like a hug, putting on the song Happy might not be the best place to start. However, it can work. It's just a matter of how often are you trying, right? So if that's the song that typically will help you feel a little better and you're familiar with it and you've practiced feeling good and moving your body to it, then it will work a little better for you. If you haven't and someone says, "Oh, this is my favorite song, it's called Happy. Why don't you listen to it?" And you do, you might feel overstimulated, totally annoyed, and want to turn it off immediately, right? That has happened to me before. So it's really important that it's something personal, all right? And just a little brief reminder, your baby doesn't need perfect pitch or perfect songs or even a song that makes sense. Your baby needs your voice, especially in postpartum. And there are studies that show that babies will actually turn their head towards the familiar voice that they've heard in utero their whole time versus a random voice they haven't heard. So the same is true for music. Babies in utero typically hear, 15 to 20 decibels less than we do, but they still feel vibrations and hear like this, kind of like you're underwater, and they will feel those changes in your body and they will hear and feel those beats from the music, especially if it's live or if you're listening to it open air. Okay, so that is important to remember for familiarity. You're already teaching them and training them what they can listen to and feel good with. And then they're going to come up with their own likes and dislikes too. Have you ever been as a mom driving in the car long after dropping off your kids already and you're still listening to the soundtrack from the Tangled movie? That was me. I was like, wait, why am I still listening to this music? The kids aren't in the car. Oh, because there's something very calming about it and familiar about it. Okay. Um, so we talked a little bit about lullabies, so I'm going to kind of skip over this, but I just want you to know it's important as a mom that not just you, but your partner also can use lullaby to support transitions. And so that means from waking to sleep, even if you just use your voice to wake up your baby with a nice melodic tone, it starts their brain waves changing in a different way than if you say nothing to them. Same with going to sleep. If you use music for your baby, even before you have that baby to indicate it's time for sleep, then not only do they become preconditioned, I mean, I wish I could say it works every time, but it doesn't work every time, but they become preconditioned. And then that becomes a familiarity to them and you, so that even if they're not sleeping, that music you've chosen to use as their bedtime routine gets you in the mindset of how to cope with maybe what might be difficult about bedtime at that particular time. Okay. Because music does, it communicates messages to our babies, it communicates messages of feelings about ourselves. It creates an immediate change in your nervous system, which encourages bonding. All right. Anytime there's a change in your nervous system for the good, your brain's going to release the love hormone, the attention hormone, and a little bit of that stress hormone so that you have a way of remembering and storing that memory of what happens. And so it's really important as a parent in postpartum that you consider not always keeping the house just quiet for your baby, that maybe during those times of wakefulness, there is a certain type of music on that you both like, classical music, maybe some spiritual music, even some nice, like I had said before, lullabies or soundtrack music. Um, it's actually also okay to listen to your preferred music with your baby for the most part, as long as you're not just setting up your preferred music that might be, let's say, heavy metal and leaving the room and leaving your baby exposed to it without watching and participating with them. Okay. That's why it's important, even with my older daughters now, when we're in the car and we're listening to music, we talk about the lyrics, because there's a lot of things happening in the lyrics of the music we listen to and the music they listen to. So it provides opportunity for connection and bonding even as they age. Language comes from music. It really does. And so if your baby starts to make sounds with their mouth, imitating that in a melodic way encourages their neural transmitters, their neural grooves to do it again and to practice it more. And so that's why it's really important that you use your voice in a melodic way, even if you don't like to sing. You don't have to be an opera singer to do it. You just need to be a parent to use your voice to communicate with your kids. And if you've ever or plan to discipline, our voice changes when we discipline, doesn't it? Right? Because we're communicating something different than we were before. So keep in mind that it's not just songs, it's your voice as well. So this goes to a few of these simple takeaways I want you to have about ways to use music at home during pregnancy, during your birth and delivery. You carry it with you as a transitional tool to wherever you're birthing, and also in postpartum, but generally as an umbrella, just for yourself as well. Just start by playing one song today, purposefully and intentionally, meaning I feel this. I'm going to put on this music because I want to do this, meaning move to a different place, move to a different feeling, reflect on something. Okay. So I feel something. I'm going to choose a piece of music and I want to try to see if it will move me here. And that's just intention, right? So especially using songs like that for skin to skin or feeding, if you have something you could do, taking a 5-minute music break just for you is very, very good for you, whether you do it in the car or whether you do it when you get to that destination or when your baby is asleep. And then try to see if you yourself feel comfortable taking and turning your breath into a small hum or a little sigh, or even a little toning. Oh, those kind of things. We use our voice when we feel pain, we use our voice when we feel pleasure, but we don't often use our voice throughout the day to feel whatever we're feeling. You're not doing it consciously, but if you start to do it consciously, you'll notice you're doing it. When you're overwhelmed, you might go, but not notice that you're doing it. So if you find yourself throughout the day breathing shallow and fast and feeling anxious, make a couple audible vocal breaths because your brain will say, oh, I can calm down, or oh, I am safe, or oh, that scream felt good. It can be a scream too. You just have to make sure you're in the right place at the right time, or people will come running to help you. But it's important. You can do it. Your voice is a very, very personal and accessible form of music that, even just with the rhythm of breath, becomes musical. And that's really important for you to remember because there's no experience necessary to have music be a tool that you can use for wellness and happiness and even expressing sadness or loss. So, music is there to support you, not to add pressure. And I love talking about this about birth because I often will get parents calling me and saying, I need a playlist for birth. What am I going to do if I don't have a playlist for birth? I have to make one. And they stress about it. But honestly, I'll just say, okay, did you have a playlist for, your wedding? Do you have a favorite movie? And so I'll ask like a couple of questions like that, and then before they know it, they've got 4 or 5 songs that are really meaningful for them. Whether it's a spiritual song or something from their wedding or something from their favorite movie. And then I just teach them and show them, oh, this might be useful during breathing. This would be useful during maybe potentially supporting contractions because you hear that rhythm. Or this would be useful for you to tone to because there's a lot of open space in the music. So start with what you know. Don't pressure yourself to add all these new songs you don't know, or Salt and Peppers push it real good if you don't even like that song. It is not appropriate if you don't like it. That's the bottom line. So it meets you where you are. Music is a great tool to meet you where you are. And one story I want to make sure to share with you is that music also helps other people meet you where you are. What do I mean by that? I've been in birthing environments where the provider, whether it's the nurse or the doctor, they're stressed, they're busy, they're dealing with something else. But our birthing environment was made to feel like, let's say, a yoga studio or a nice Zen place because that's what the mother needed and wanted in that moment. It is very rare and hard for a provider who's rushing to walk into a room that sounds like that and feels like that and smells like relaxation, and to just be loud and obnoxious and go, meet their own agenda. It happens, but that's why the music is a useful tool for the environment, and that includes the people who are coming in to help care for you during birth, that you can redirect their brain, their reticular center, to pay attention to the music and say, oh, can you speak a little quieter over the music? Or let's slow down and talk about this. Or vice versa is often also true. There's been times at birth when, let's say, for example, the mom's stalled or been in what we call that latent stage of labor where it's just kind of going real slow and everything's going well, but just slow. And that doesn't mean it needs to be sped up, but oftentimes it will be offered. But what's more important then is to maybe use the music and change what's happening in the room so that that progression does occur. So you might go from lying down and trying to relax if you're not progressing to finding your favorite, let's say, salsa music or dance music from your wedding, or music that kind of makes you feel like moving your feet a little bit and get up and move around with your partner in the room or with the provider or with the doula, whoever's helping you. And that same thing, when the provider comes into the room and sees everybody's mood is up, people are moving, things are progressing, they might be more likely to let you still keep going and doing that, or try to make progress, or try to just like give you that time to experience what they could obviously see by the support of the music is meaningful. It's a memory in the making, and music helps do that. All right. And so I just want to, as in that same accord, kind of let you know that yes, music is an easy resource and you can use it purposefully. It can be very intentionally like effective. I don't want to say music can't cause harm because it can, because it does interfere, it does it in influence biological processes like blood pressure and brain waves and things like that. But if ultimately you're choosing it with a positive intention, even the most, let's say, non-likely song for birth could be utilized in that way if it meets the need at the moment. So there aren't really wrong choices as long as you're using them intentionally and not just blasting music for your baby without any context. All right. So that's just the one warning I'll leave you with. And then these takeaways. Start listening to music. That's your first assignment. You probably already do, but I'm asking you to start listening intentionally to the music that you like and how it makes you feel. Find what works for you. Turn off the noise of what everyone else is saying is the right music for birth. You might have looked at playlists already. Even the playlist that I would like to send you as an example of some different pieces of music doesn't mean it's the only way to birth. It's just a place to start, to listen to those songs and say, oh, that makes me feel relaxed and sleepy. I might want to put that in my stage of labor where I'm going to need to sleep and relax. Oh, that makes me feel like getting up and moving and taking a walk and dancing with my partner. That might need to go in early labor. Okay. So even if I prescribe something, it's really a matter of finding what works for you. And then start with 3 playlists. Don't try to make it one birth playlist because birth is many, many hours for most people. Even if it's short, it's still more than, a certain amount of time where you might not necessarily have a timeline of music, but you have a purpose and intention for the music. So, for example, if you start with 3 playlists, I would suggest doing early labor, like early active labor, active being the key, meaning you're upright, you're moving, you're bouncing, you're walking, you're rocking, right? And then I would do some relaxation or sleep type music, right? Something that's very familiar to you, maybe from your favorite romance movies or even classical music or even instrumental faith-based music that you like, hymns that are comforting. Um, and then I would also add a third playlist that is more about breathing baby down or providing rhythmic support, something that's steady and comforting in that way. So I would just, remember you don't have to put them all on one playlist. You can start a couple different more. The other thing I want to mention to you is that because music is accessible on lots of different platforms and customizable, you can call your playlist whatever you want so that you and your partner know when to play them. Like, for example, if I start losing my mind, play this one. Or if I start feeling this way, or if I start, feeling sad, play this playlist. Okay. So it's kind of useful to help the partner know how to use it with you, especially if you're already practicing with some of those intentions. Okay. And then I mentioned that just now, practice with the music and express yourself creatively. That doesn't mean you have to dance, but it can. And it can mean you could sing, or it can mean you can just breathe more actively. Expressing yourself creatively has to do with intention too. So it could be journaling, it could be painting with your toddler while you're even maybe in early labor contracting with the second and painting something to a piece of music. That is what I love to encourage people to do because birth is an everyday experience. It's an everyday miracle for people, but it usually only happens for people maybe once, 1 to 4 times in their life. So even though it's happening every day to people, it only happens to you a select amount of times. And so it's important that you make it meaningful. And music is the best way to do that. It's like creating a soundtrack for your birth, but even better because it's intentional, it's purposeful, and it's effective. And then you have this memory forever of some of those things. And that being said, if negative memories come along with some of that music that you've used or planned to use for your birth because it went differently than you thought, that's when it's really important to maybe find a time and space to listen to that music with a supportive person, either with a music therapist, with your doula, with your partner, or another therapist, or someone at the center, so you can process it. Instead of never playing that song again, use it as a tool to process what's happened in the trauma. And that's, again, one of the things that here at the center that Celeste has done so beautifully is to remind everybody that you're not alone. She has peer support groups here, community events here, and all maternal mental health resources. So just remember that. And if you have any questions about specific music to utilize, I'd be happy to help you. And you can reach out to the center and Celeste can hook us up. Okay, you're muted, Celeste, and I'm still recording, so let me try to figure out how to stop that. and you muted. Did you want to say something before I stop the recording?
No, go ahead and stop
Okay.
recording. Yeah.